afternoon to everyone, and welcome again to the fourth day of the CEAP Congress. My name is Jubel Cruz from CEAP, coordinator for the PCSS, or Philippine Catholic School Standards, and I will be your moderator for today's final session. As mentioned in the earlier sessions, the series was organized according to the six domains of the Philippine Catholic School Standards. This last session is specific to our Catholic higher education institutions, which is on research and community engagement. Before we proceed, let me give a few reminders. First, to get an e-certificate for the whole Congress, you will need to submit an evaluation form for one session each day and a general evaluation form at the end of the Congress. In other words, you only have to submit a total of 3 evaluation forms to get the e-certificate. So you should already have submitted one from your chosen session yesterday, submit another from this session, and finally one from the whole Congress tomorrow, Friday. The link to the evaluation form may be found in the captions of the videos both on the YouTube CAP channel and our CAP Facebook Live. In the evaluation form tomorrow, please make sure to type your name and email address accurately. The name you type should be your name and not that of the school or community, as it will automatically be reflected on your certificate, exactly as you had typed it in. In addition, you may not receive your certificate if you type an incorrect email address. All the videos of the different sessions will be saved in the videos section of both the CEAP Facebook page and YouTube CEAP channel. You can go to these sites to view the session again or other sessions which you might have missed. Second, as the talk is ongoing, we encourage the audience to post your questions or comment at the comments section of either the Facebook page or the YouTube channel. These will be mentioned during the question and answer portion. Lastly, we encourage you to share this webinar to your networks with the hashtags hashtag CAP and hashtag CAP Let us proceed with the session. Our speaker is currently the director of the Center for Research, Innovation, and Development at St. Paul University, Manila. Friends, let us welcome Dr. Brian Saludes Bantugan.
Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. It's an honor to have been invited to speak in the National Convention of the CEAP. My talk really covers 3 areas. So it's culture, creativity, and of course research, where I'm currently assigned at this time. It was really sparked by the challenges that we now face in relation to COVID-19. So I hope this helps everyone who is watching this particular program, and this could be the starting point of many different kinds of programs that will address creative needs within schools. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Brian Bantugan. I am the director of the Center for Research, Innovation, and Development in St. Paul University, Manila. How did I get here? I received good education in a Catholic school until grade 6, enough to make me pass in a science high school. I learned enough in high school that I passed the UPCAT in college, giving me a spot in applied physics and a chance to move to electrical engineering when computer engineering was not yet around. I was enabled enough to do some soul-searching by my exposure in parish work in college that I decided to move to fine arts, particularly visual communication. My previous education, I suppose, taught me that I am an autonomous and self-determining human being. My education saved me at that point. I was crazy enough to do some onstage and backstage theater work before graduating, enabling me to earn money when my scholarship was no longer there and my parents refused to support my decisions. I was fortunate enough to be a practicumer in Philippine Children's Television Foundation, producer of Batibot, and land a research job in ABS-CBN that introduced me to creative research in the media industry. Imagine how much those experiences mean at this time of COVID-19. Both are champions of educational television. I am here today bearing a PhD at the end of my surname, but all I really needed to make this talk come from my childhood to college days. The PhD allowed me to talk to superintendents of Catholic schools. That is good too. My talk has three parts. I want to talk about culture, especially with respect to a study I assisted on school climate and culture and the whole child. Also wanted to tie that to creativity because of the challenge we are now facing and as an attempt to fortify the foundations of integral human formation. Third, I would like to bring in research to pose important questions that need to be answered by everyone to enable us to survive this pandemic and those following. We need research to survive the knowledge economy. We need creativity to survive this pandemic. What constitutes culture? I took anthropology and Philippine studies as cognates in my doctoral studies. Let me answer that from their shared lens. Culture looks like the image on your screens. It is made of a complex web of relationships. But culture is more than just the interaction of creatures under the sea or in any natural ecosystem. It is far more complex. We are not born with culture. It is not something we inherit from our parents. It is something that we grow up with. The only way to have it is to learn it. But culture is not for the cats and dogs, although they are part of our culture. Only humans create culture. Culture is created. Culture is a social construct. We make it. We live it. We change it. We survive. Culture can unmake us in the same way that we can unmake ourselves through the wars that we wage, the oppressions we become accomplices in, the persecutions we turn a blind eye to. Culture is imperfect the way humans, their creators, are. The good thing is we can unmake culture as much as it can unmake us. Every day, we find ourselves making and unmaking culture, making and unmaking ourselves by the decisions we make and the actions that support and contradict them. Because humans can subvert who they are, we constantly unmake ourselves whether or not we seek it. It is the reality of the human condition. We are our own worst enemies. When humans come together and agree to make and unmake together in coherent and incoherent ways, we have culture. The basic unit of culture is the family. When a child goes to school, the child already carries with him or her years of culture. The challenge for a teacher every day is to find reasons to honor that child because, and not despite, his culture or her culture. The teachers unmake that child every day, and the child submits completely. We hope that teachers also make them by making them aware of their capacity to make themselves better despite the inadequacies of school culture and the culture of their families. We hope that by age 18, they know what is best for their well-being. We have at least 12 years to help them do that. We have a 12-year contract with parents who subject their children to our making and unmaking. We do our part by sharing our school culture. Culture is possible because people decide to agree to live a certain way. Philosophers from Epicurus to Rawls tried to understand the social contract through the ages. As a social contract, it is binding to those who consciously agree to abide by its norms or terms. Learners learn about the norms after their parents enter the social contract. That social contract is invisible. It is hardly talked about. Nobody signs a form. It has power, nevertheless. It has power over everyone despite the participants' ignorance. Culture allows it to keep going. Culture operates by virtue of public trust until it fails and the unmaking begins. From a critical theories lens, the social contract that binds people to a culture stems from power relations in the social domain. For Karl Marx, there is always the oppressor and the oppressed. For Gramsci, the oppressor co-opts the oppressed in an oppressive social contract through force of repressive institutions like the police and the military, or more subtly through institutions like the family, education, religion, and media. In an imperfect world, where some groups want power over others, and we see this every day in media, education can be used against the very people it intends to serve. In the wrong hands, education can bind us in an oppressive social contract we call culture. That said, education must watch over itself, examine itself, question itself proactively, lest find itself co-opted into an unjust system. In the case of the new normal, a term many people immediately use to refer to a scenario beyond COVID-19, we see the manifestations of the new norm as artifacts such as face masks and face shields, mentifacts or ideas like shared information on COVID-19, and social facts like associations or relationships, like the 2 meter distance between people regardless of their relationship. Who decided the new normal? If the new normal constitutes new culture, who decided to make it everyone's? For dissenters, the new normal is a scheme that deprives people of their civil liberties. For co-opters, safety first before civil liberties. What was your role in making and unmaking this new normal? Don't you mind not having a say? It is a new social contract your education enables you to examine. Will you not examine it? As empowered human beings, capable of making and unmaking culture, should we not examine it? Or have we surrendered that power like little children who have no idea what the world is about? We are hardly children. Teachers spend 20 years on average in school learning about how the world works and the values to keep it a safe place to live in. It takes that much time to enable us to build and change culture. Change managers. That is the role of educational leaders, and every teacher must learn to be one. That is why we need to go to graduate school. Will it take one non-living virus to throw all of it out the window? Is that how it works? Is that how it ends? If so, our schools have failed us by making it easy for us to cut off our hands, the hands that rock the cradle, the hands that should rule over any culture. As change managers, teachers are also cultural managers. They not only know how to navigate and negotiate culture towards the greater well-being of learners, they also enable learners to navigate and negotiate culture better for the welfare of others who have no access to school. As such, the new normal should not be an easy thing to accept without question. If anything, the new normal should be the result of our responsible questioning of cultures imposed on us that we have not yet fully examined. Why don't we? We all need to vote in a cultural election. That is our social contract as educators. Or has our education not taught us that? That needs to change, or else our youth will never have a voice on the future of their culture. Perhaps we are not people to blame after all, because climate affects culture. If there is fear all around us, the personal safety contract takes over the social contract. We choose flight over fight. The choice replicates as sound in an echo chamber, and before we know it, the flight culture takes shape and unmakes even the seasoned fighters. We make some, we lose some. Remnants of our culture, artifacts, mentifacts, and sociofacts, subvert the very culture that made them. In an imperfect world, it happens. Let's try to watch two videos. One on a brown-skinned girl who is treated like a goddess, another on a man who is stolen like a cow. In the first video, ask yourself, what values are behind the cultural practice venerating the child goddess, the Kumari? Is the child in a better position, being treated differently or more favorably than the other children? Or does the privilege come with a cost?
Nepal, people worship the little girl as an incarnation of a Hindu supreme goddess, Lalizu. The living goddess is one of very unique in culture. It's only found in Nepal. So it's a manifestation of the goddess. I have been the Kumari of Patan since April 2010. I was 5 years old. When a Kumari retires, there is a community who look for the eligible girls who maybe like from 3 years to 6 or 7 years. So all the girls are collected in one courtyard. The priest performs some rituals. The wife of the royal priest, she examines us physically to make sure that we have no scar. So the one who has the strongest birth star is selected as the goddess. Firstly, I was not allowed to go outside of my house, and there are many other small rules, like you cannot share food with anyone. Even my mom and dad, they don't call me by my name, so they will regard me as a goddess. People will come and they will ask for the blessings. So, but I was allowed to have education. So teacher will come to teach me at my home itself. And I was allowed to go outside during special ceremonies. That was about 15 to 16 times a year. But at that time, I had to be carried in a palanquin or in someone's arms so that my feet wouldn't touch the ground. After 10 years of staying inside a house, going out was a bit strange for me. In the first few months, I was not able to walk properly. I needed someone's help to guide me in the outer world. It was it was very shocking for me. It was very strange. My feet were trembling because it was the first time I was putting my feet on the ground, so it was somehow very strange to me. And because as a Kumari, you're not allowed to talk with other people, so communicating was also a bit difficult. It took almost 3 to 4 months to adapt back to normal life. I think if she could go outside just as other girls, there'll be no difference between between a goddess and a girl. So it's a rule and it has been practiced since so long. So it must continue. But what I think is that all the facilities has to be brought inside her house for her. Like the friend circle, extra art, music, anything that other girls get outside of the world, it must be brought inside for her. Being a Kumari is a positive thing? Yeah, it's a positive thing. But there need to be some changes as well, like regarding the freedom part of things. My aunt was also a Kumari. She is 65 years old. She's also called lifelong Kumari. Kumari is changed when she has her menstruation, her first menstruation, but in her case she never had menstruation, so there was no point in changing Kumari. So she became Kumari for 30 years, and later, because she was not young, so it was difficult to carry her outside, so the government changed another official Kumari, a small one, but she doesn't go out in festival, but she does all the rituals inside the house, so there are many people who come to worship her as well. Yes, she's the only one. Actually, I was very happy when I was Kumari. I feel really blessed and very lucky to be one, because not all girls can become a goddess.
In the video, you witnessed an older Kumari whose special situation and treatment kept her from experiencing menstruation. Here it was clear that the change in the girl's biology led to adjustments in the cultural practice of considering only young girls as Kumari. Within cultures, there remain spaces for exceptions and flexibility. Culture here is also a double-edged sword. Special treatment is paid for by disablement. Like school, the girl child is completely at the mercy of the community. She has no voice. It is completely up to the adults in the community to change the cultural practice. Until then, a girl child's life is frozen until her menstruation, or for a lifetime if menstruation never happens. In the second video, a man is kidnapped to be the groom for a bride. Unlike other patriarchal societies, or in Kyrgyzstan, where women are kidnapped instead of men, the kidnapped groom has the option to remain silent and remain true to the culture that allows it. As you watch the video, ask yourself, what values are behind the cultural practice of coercion? And what values allow him to fight it?
Bride kidnapping is an unfortunate truth in Kyrgyzstan, Africa, and some parts of India, where the girl is abducted and forcefully married to a stranger. But have you ever heard of a groom getting kidnapped? It happens in some parts of UP and Bihar. Check out the story of one such groom, Rajiv Kumar.
केस हम लोग दायर किए थे अपहरण और जबरन शादी का। अपने घर से निकले थे, कुछ दूर आगे चलने के बाद एक 4 व्हीलर जो है आके हमारे बगल में रुकी और जबरदस्ती उसमें हमको बैठा लिया गया। उसके बाद जब निकाला गया गाड़ी से तो लाया गया मंदिर पर। जब वहाँ हम विरोध किए, उसके बाद पहले तो मारपीट किए। उसके बाद जब नहीं हुआ तो जो पिस्टल का यूज किया, अपने कनपट्टी पर रख के बोले या तो करो, नहीं तो अदरवाइज हम तुमको जान से मार देंगे। उसके बाद फिर मेरी वहाँ जबरदस्ती शादी की गई। एक बजे के बाद हमको फिर वहाँ से लड़की पक्ष के यहाँ ले जाया गया। सुबह जब हुई तब ना हमें किसी से मिलने दिया गया, ना ही किसी को कोई बुलाया वहाँ। उसके बाद उन लोगों का कहना था आप किए हैं शादी, आप बुलाइए घर वाले को। फिर मेरी जब यहाँ बात हुई, मुझे पूछा गया तो हम कहे जो हम एक्सेप्ट नहीं करेंगे, और यहाँ कंप्लेन दर्ज किया गया जो हमारे लड़का को जबरदस्ती उठा लिया गया है। वहाँ थाना पहुंची, हमको वहाँ देखिए अंदर रूम में हमको बंद किया गया था। वहाँ से थाना यहाँ लाई, उसका मेरा बयान लिया गया और उसके बाद हमको रिलीज किया गया। उसके बाद वहाँ से लोग प्रेशर बनाने लगे रिलेटिव सबसे, जो किसी तरह मैनेज हो, जोर जबरदस्ती पैसा हर तरफ से। इसी बीच एक आध बार जो है वहाँ से आए आदमी यहीं बैठ के बातचीत किए, जिसका कोई निष्कर्ष नहीं निकला। इसमें कोई फॉल्ट नहीं रहता है लड़की का, लेकिन फिर भी लड़का का भी तो एक स्वाभिमान होता है, जिंदगी उसके साथ हमको जीना है। जिसके वजह से हमको इतना मारा पीटा गया है, उसको कैसे हम एक्सेप्ट करें।
You heard the groom side of the story, but what happens to the girl who's married to a kidnapped groom? Check out the story of Anita Singh, who was married to a random stranger.
शादी तो हो गई, लेकिन उसके बाद घर में एक मातम सा माहौल था। मेरे ससुर परिवार वो सब मानने के लिए राजी नहीं थे, मगर किसका बाप शादी कर दिया तो हम लड़की को लाएंगे ही नहीं। ये सब सुनने के बाद और अंदर से घुटन महसूस होती थी कि मेरे साथ मेरे बाबूजी क्या करते। सिर्फ रोने के सिवा कुछ नहीं था। हम करेंगे तो क्या करेंगे जाने के बाद। विदाई हुई जब मैं अपने ससुराल गई तो मेरे परसने के लिए कोई नहीं। हमारे ऊपर जितना अत्याचार हो रहा था वो सभी को हम सहते गए, क्योंकि मुझे ये लग गया था कि मेरे पिताजी गलत किए हैं तो उसका सजा हमें को भुगतना है। 4 साल तक मेरे हस्बैंड मेरा साथ नहीं, लेकिन मेरा अपना आत्मविश्वास था कि नहीं, जैसे हो इस रिश्ता को हमको नाम देना, आगे बढ़ाना। आत्मविश्वास और अपने हस्बैंड के सपोर्ट के कारण 10 साल में स्ट्रगल करते थे। हम अपने हस्बैंड से भी आज संतुष्ट हैं, अपने परिवार से।
In the second video, notice how the rest of society shows indifference to the kidnapping and the marriage born out of coercion. The man fights as a kidnapped woman in Kyrgyzstan would and escapes by fighting his way out. In Kyrgyzstan, however, the woman submits or commits suicide. Marriage is such a value that it allows anyone to violate another person's freedom, even at the cost of somebody else's life or dignity. It is still around because even if somebody shouts foul, the social contract behind it remains valuable for many. Hence, patriarchy respects no one, even its own. In the next 2 videos, you will see how 2 countries from the global north tried to go against the grain of the rest of the world. The first video shows us how valuing human dignity is observed despite one's criminal offense. The second video shows us how focusing on the child is considered more important than results of standardized tests. I do not mean to highlight the global north at the expense of the global south by showing these videos. I just wanted to show how it is possible to stick to your own values despite what the rest of the world says. How divergent cultures can exist within a hegemonic culture and show the better cultural options in addressing long-standing problems. While watching the third video, ask yourself, is this what true Christianity means? And why have other Christian societies not followed suit? Note that Norway is not a Christian country. It is a hugely non-religious country.
And here is my closet, like with the fridge and everything. Koamal has been living here for nearly 4 years, getting an education, working as a car mechanic, and serving his 15-and-a-half-year-long sentence in jail. Wake up in the morning, take shower, take your breakfast, go to job, go to school, finish the school, come back, you have dinner, relax a little bit, like a normal life. Just
salmon and deer steaks among the items on the menu, take walks in the park, pray and make art, do outdoor and indoor sports.
We can have like, you see here the badminton, or we can play some football, maybe volleyball. This is going to be a good place to come, just to relax, get out from themselves, you know.
Halden has a library and a school for those who want either to continue the education they were getting before going to jail or getting a new one altogether.
Yeah, you have some of them too.
Literature, history, math, chemistry, physics, you name it, all are taught to the inmates.
You're being locked in a room, and that's where you're going to stay for the next 10 years. To continue to be human, they need input.
Inmates also have access to the photo shop, grocery store, workshop, and a mechanics shop, and even my personal favorite, a sound studio.
Some of them didn't have the system in their life. There was Luther in school, Luther in the working life, and everything. Didn't have nothing. Fantastic. And they come in here and learn it.
So far, the prison hasn't seen one riot or an attempt to break out, and when we were inside, I couldn't really see why anyone would ever want to. Frankly, I'm stunned. It's going to take time for me to process what we've seen here today, but what's clear is that even though this is one of the most humane prisons in the world, it still is a place to punish criminals with strict rules, security, and limitations. And since it's been operating only for a few years, right now, it's too early to say how effective this new penitentiary format is. C.O.N.G.R.E.S.S reporting from Norway.
In the third video, you witnessed how better treated criminals are in Norway. They are not without punishment, however. They remain separated from the rest of society by being kept in the isolation facility. Clearly, Norwegian authorities value not only life but also redemption, more than other countries. However, in a country where most people suffer poverty, the same prison will be considered unjust. An exceptional culture, such as this one, will remain only relevant in countries where there is better and more equitable distribution of wealth. In the following video, ask yourself, what kind of education would you like for your child? And what will it take to bring Finnish education to your school?
It's 8 a.m. on a cold morning in the suburbs of Helsinki, and these primary school children are getting ready for class. This morning's lesson, ancient history.
Well, they are reading with pairs some text about Egyptian ancient life. They are reading, and then I'm going to ask something. What did they find out from the book? I think we all are ready now.
This is a school system that for years has been among the world's best.
And then what about this gold one? Yes, Minttu, please.
And yet these kids will spend half as much time in a classroom as Australian children.
When you go to the first grade, when you are 7 years old, the amount of hours is 20 hours a week. It's the minimum. And then it gets more hours the older you get, but it's still less than in many countries in Europe or in the world.
In Finland, it's individual teachers who decide how the curriculum is taught, including how much technology should feature in their classrooms.
Me tehdään sellaista pyramidiprojektia, missä me esimerkiksi me kirjoitetaan hieroglyfeillä meidän nimet paperille ja sitten me tehdään Classroomista tehtäviä.
11-year-old Minttu Latumaki asks to leave class to work at the school's own student-run cafe.
You can go. Yeah, that's okay.
Hello. One cake for the cameraman, one cake for me, and 2 coffees. How much is it?
€2 and 60 cents.
How much change?
€2 and 40 cents.
Pesos. Perfect. Is there a tip jar? Do you have tips?
No.
No tips. Okay. In Finland, school lunches, like books and excursions, are free. The kids select what they want, sit down with their friends and teachers to eat before they clean up after themselves. The children rug up again to play outside. Some play a raucous version of soccer. Some play basketball, while others wait for the hockey rink to open. There are plenty of options for bad weather days too. The facilities in this school are just amazing. Outside we saw an ice skating rink, and in here where the kids can play at lunchtime, there's a ping pong table, a pool table, and in here for the cold winter days they've got a room full of beanbags and couches, and there's even a PlayStation in the corner. It seems like it's such a rich school, you must get more money than other schools.
No, we don't. It saves money for everyone, actually.
Gimme.
They take
Gimme.
and borrow too.
In Finland, schools are not allowed to raise private funds or to charge fees from parents. All schools are equitably funded from taxation.
And in our system, everything is free for the students, actually. We don't collect any money from the parents.
We want our schools to be equal and have the equal opportunities to arrange the education. So therefore also the finance system needs to be equal and treat equally all the schools.
Ja sitten taas tulee 16.
Mintu Latomaki's older brother Levi is in year 7, and this afternoon he's got maths.
We have, like the last chapter before we have the next exam.
There are regular exams in Finland, but the results of these tests are not published and shared.
We have national tests, but the big difference is we don't compare schools that this is not good school, this is bad school, and we just use the information that we evaluate ourselves.
But perhaps the single biggest difference in Finnish education is the standard of teaching. Levi's maths teacher, C.O.N.G.R.E.S.S, speaks 5 languages and has postgraduate qualifications.
So every one of us, we have to have a master's degree to be teachers. So like, for example, me, I'm math and chemistry and physics teacher.
In Finland, a career as a teacher is highly sought after.
To enter the studies in university, actually it's really hard. They take something like 10% to study teaching. If you really want to be a teacher, it can't be your second or third or I don't know what kind of option. It has to be your first.
I believe that they know what is the best for our children. I'm not a teacher, I don't have that education, so we don't interfere their work.
In Finland, there's little anxiety about finding the right school for your child.
We trust that they have very good schools, so we don't need to do any research work or...
I think that's not a question.
No.
Finland is a vastly different country with a tiny, homogeneous society. But its education success must surely offer some lessons for Australia.
I would like to say that try to build a system that you trust the people.
And its investment in teachers seems an obvious place to begin.
The society respects the teachers. It means also the parents respect the teachers and they don't question the teachers. And that's in Finland a really huge thing.
The fourth video showed us how one country took the liberty to reinvent its educational system, regardless of where the rest of the world is. The Finnish child is more important than the dominant educational system. Education should be at the service of the child and not the other way around. The system can be tweaked as much as the culture will allow, as far as the values will challenge them. In the last 2 videos, creative liberties and an ethical value system drove the cultural changes needed in institutions. For the same to happen elsewhere, independent thinkers must be in positions of power, and a question in public must be cultivated. Clearly, there is a way out of a dysfunctional culture. A strong sense of autonomy and independence is key in creating countercultures. The following last videos will show two different pictures of culture and climate. One tells us of a menti fact, the idea of the gross national happiness, by an ethical leader that propelled a small, often unrecognized country into global prominence. The second shows us the social fact, the prominence of authorities with firearms, that continues to shame a country long known as a benchmark of democracy. In the following video, ask yourself, does the political system of Bhutan make it less relevant in the present state of political affairs, despite its contributions to ethical leadership? And will punishments for violators in Bhutan make it a less compassionate society?
Everyone watching this video probably knows what GDP stands for. Gross Domestic Product. It's a way of measuring a country's total economic activity. Here in Bhutan, they don't measure their nation's progress with GDP. Instead, they use GNH.
Gross National Happiness.
Gross National Happiness is what you see here, what you see behind us. The concept was invented by King Jigme Singye Wengjak in 1974, who decided his country's wealth should be measured by the happiness of his people, as opposed to how much money they have. Taking a little walk here in the kids' parks of Paro, and everybody's happy. It's amazing. GNH is derived from Buddhist values, putting forward the people's quality of life and assuring that material and spiritual development happen together. And it's true, people really are happy here.
They are also very happy to see you all here.
Medical care is 100% free. Education is 100% free.
My name is C.O.N.G.R.E.S.S.
Nice to meet you. And Bhutan has consistently been ranked #1 in Asia in the Happiness Index and top 10 in the world. So we drove about 2 hours from Thimphu to a really small village. Behind me, we have around 16 households here, maybe around 300 people total of this village. They just offered us some lunch that they cooked, which looks really good actually.
Chili and cheese only. Egg and beans.
Gross national happiness is measured by 4 pillars: sustainable development, environmental protection, cultural preservation, such as wearing the national dress. We have the traditional outfits here in Bhutan, and good governance. While the principles of GNH may have set their development back according to Western standards, consider what it has done for their environment. The country is covered by 72% forests and is growing fast as they are highly protected. They produce more CO2 than they consume, making Bhutan the only carbon-negative country in the world. Endangered species like the Bengal tiger, snow leopard, and rhino have found peace in Bhutan, away from India and Nepal, where they are being hunted to extinction. In fact, if you are caught hunting them in Bhutan, you are thrown in prison for life. It seriously blows my mind how an entire country measures its prosperity by how happy the people are. Myself, being a Bhutanese, I feel that we are happy with what we have. We are happy with the culture we have. You can really see how happiness impacts a greater part of humanity, and it puts Bhutan in its own category compared to the rest of the world.
In the last video, you saw how lack in economic abundance was never a problem in attaining cultural prosperity. The happiness of most people is likely not to produce violators of the law in Bhutan, so imprisonment may never be an issue at all. Bhutan, compared to Norway, seems more proactive culturally. Norway is more reactive, but more creative in its solutions. Either way, rich or not so rich, any country can subvert a dominant culture. In the last video, ask yourself, what is my contribution in the current state of affairs in the country? And have I become an enabler of collapse of cultural integrity by remaining silent?
The police officer in Quezon City faces criminal and administrative investigations after shooting a retired Philippine soldier near a quarantine checkpoint on Tuesday. The victim, identified as Winston Ragos, was rushed to a nearby hospital where he was later declared dead. Based on the police report, the suspect, Police Master Sergeant Daniel Torrende Jr., and four other police trainees from the Highway Patrol Group were at the checkpoint in Barangay Pasong Putik when Ragos approached and started shouting at them. The police asked Ragos to go home as he was supposedly violating lockdown measures. But Ragos allegedly attempted to pull out a gun from his back. The Quezon City Police District Director says the Criminal Investigation and Detection Unit and the District Internal Affairs Service are now investigating the incident.
The last video showed us how militarization has progressed in the context of COVID-19 at the expense of citizens. Despite the avoidance of the use of militarized words such as lockdown, we see a military solution to a medical problem. Our value for human life is in no way part of this solution. In a country such as the Philippines, ethical values are being made and unmade simultaneously, and in the chaos that it brings, we find ourselves stormed by conflicting artifacts, sociofacts, and mentifacts. There is a cultural war being waged by opposing sides. What culture shall we create in the midst of it all? We must decide, as the innocent learners wait to be shaped by our hands, by the culture we will decide on their behalf. If we assume culture to be a natural result of creativity, creativity must be a part of any culture. Creativity supports the development of culture. Culture and its creative processes serve a specific community. Its value lies in that community. We cannot expect a specific culture to have the same value anywhere. Culture privileges its creators. Its creators privilege their culture more than others. If normal prison was to be depicted as a typical chair, the Norwegian prison will not look the same. For a person who sees much value in the normal prison, the Norwegian prison makes no sense. For the Norwegian who considers his country's prison system as that which is truly reformative, he would depict it as a typical chair, working and functional. Meanwhile, he will see the typical prison system as broken, in need of fixing. Either way, no perfect prison system can come from an imperfect culture. At some point, the contradiction of each will appear. It is the paradox of culture that it carries within itself the seed of its own unmaking. That said, any culture is always in constant state of simultaneous construction and deconstruction, or of being put together and taken apart, simultaneous creation and decreation. Beyond the complexity of a culture, given the web of interrelationships between artifacts, sociofacts, and mentifacts, it has many moving, equally complex parts. Institutions as creations will always be difficult to manage, and yet it has to be managed as effectively as one can. It is difficult enough to manage a culture based on an unwritten social contract. Add to it the impositions of a pandemic, a sudden change in culture will be too much to bear for someone who resists change. School is not the place for someone who is averse to change, because school culture constantly changes. School climate, and vice versa, through simultaneous processes of creation and decreation. The social contract that created the computer must be ready to be uncreated by the computer's later evolutions. To stop this constant creation and decreation process, the value system that supports the culture must be torn down and replaced with something that self-destructs. The school is not a perfect system. Democracies are not perfect systems. It will self-destruct if it does not adapt. In the middle of this imperfect system we call a school is the child. Without valid and reliable knowledge to manage the imperfections, the simultaneous and unpredictable construction and deconstruction of culture in school, there is no way to serve the child optimally. Research is key. What should we do to know how to sustain the ideal, though imperfect, school culture and climate. We need to know what the ideal climate and culture are. The photo on the left may not be better looking compared to the more contemporary setup in the right image, but it may have been the best possible environment when it was created. How do we know which setting serves learners more effectively in specific contexts? Research. What makes us say that learning under the mango tree is pathetic? The Waldorf School and other contemporary alternative systems called hack schools teach science and math through gardening. As a result, they learn to eat vegetables, use organic fertilizer, and support farmers. In between sessions, they climb trees. Research in creativity reveals that children are most creative when they are at play. Adults become less creative as they grow old, and they become teachers and educational leaders too. Research on learning has revealed that visual stimulation is key in learning. The mind learns faster through visuals. The image shows a learning space in Cebu that teaches learners arts and design. They advise us to use yellow lights than white lights. It causes less eye strain. Remember, learners today are visual learners. Strained visual, strained learning. Is this better than the mango tree garden? Research. Research reveals that learning by doing facilitates better learning. Body memory through kinesthetic learning leads to better learning through integral memory work. The workshop, the atelier, the apprenticeship program are rising from the ashes. The school of living traditions, the home of learning while living the tradition, can never be underestimated. It is the school that will sustain cultural integrity in a highly hegemonic system. Can this be adapted in non-indigenous settings? Research. Because the school culture and climate are essentially spaces of creation and decreation, it is supposed to be a space most conducive to creative work. However, today, the constant underscoring of the need to develop creative learners indicates that our old learning spaces have undermined the learning environment that is supposed to be essentially creative. Students are no longer creative. Why? Research. When the culture is no longer creative, perhaps the value system that supports the culture's creativity has given way to values that no longer emphasize creativity. It has become self-destructive. Nowhere in the world has the dysfunctional system become more prominent than in the US, where school massacres have become all too frequent. At some point, American schools have ceased to support the youth, and the most troubled youths have turned against their schools. They have become self-destructive. You reap what you sow. And the system has become way too blind to examine itself. They blame the guns, they blame the laws that allow free movement of guns, even among the youth. They blame the media, they blame gaming, they blame the climate, not the culture. Yes, the climate has something to do with it, but where is the culture in all these? The complexity of school culture and climate is never linear. You cannot remove the gun and assume that kids will no longer kill each other. The American way of life is way too holy to be questioned. Where is the culture? Where are the values? Nowhere, because culture privileges its creators and vice versa. So where do you turn to teach people self-reflection and social critique? The schools. But where are the schools? What have they become in America? In a study conducted by Father Norman Melchor in different schools about school climate and culture, which I have assisted, we learned how different schools from all over the Philippines fared in terms of the tenets of the whole child. In the slide, you can see the web graph on the tenet healthy and the tenet supported. The left web graph reveals parents, teachers, and students from the National Capital Region find that the tenet healthy leaves a lot to be desired. It is worse in some schools in regions 3, 7, and 11. Note that incidences of unhealthiness in schools are found in all major island groups. As you stare at the left image, remember that shape. Then proceed to the image on the right. What image do you see under the tenet supported? The two images are quite similar. It tells you not only where the scores are least, but also how the scores vary across schools. Under the tenet safe and challenged, a shape similar to the first two web graphs remain. The web graph on the right is no different. The left image you will find later is the smallest animal-looking graph, while the image on the right is the largest version of the same animal profile-looking graph. A similar shape can be observed under the tenet engaged. After having seen all 5 web graphs of the whole child tenets across all schools, it can be seen that the tenet that was scored the lowest was safe, and that which was scored the highest was the tenet challenged. School is a challenging place. School safety is the least appreciated. Do you see America? If you want to be proactive, maybe you should. On the slide, notice the red line which represents the scores under the tenet safe. Being the innermost line means that it is the least scored across all schools. Maybe we should see America before America becomes real in our schools. I think we should ask the question, why is the tenet safe the least scored across all the samples? The answer to the question on school climate lies in culture. Unfortunately, that is not the question we asked during our study. Nevertheless, we found reason to ask that as a research question. Only by knowing the answer can we recommend cultural solutions that can change the school climate if actions to tweak the school climate will not be enough. Let us remember that school culture will form creative learners unless we agree not to make it work that way. Perhaps, based on the data, we are starting to do just that. Let us remember that unsafe spaces are uncreative spaces. Spaces where creation and recreation are suppressed. Unsafe spaces will kill the school culture that gives life, because by itself, school culture is meant to be a generative or creative space. Data show a cause for concern, especially in the time of the pandemic. How does the current school culture in the country influence the school climate that is found to be the most lacking among the whole child tenets? What educational values lead to the culture and climate of uncreation that make schools perceived as less safe? What makes our schools less safe learning spaces? If there is any group of people who are mostly negatively affected by unsafe spaces, they are highly sensitive people. Another word for them is empaths. Empaths are highly creative people. Highly creative people set the exemplars and momentum of creativity in any learning space. So what makes our schools less safe learning spaces for highly creative people? Here are examples of traits that most, if not all, empaths have. If you're an empath, you absolutely abhor violence and cruelty of any kind. You're frequently emotionally exhausted from absorbing other people's feelings. Time pressure really rattles you. You withdraw often. You're jumpy. You think deeply. You're a seeker. Sudden loud noises startle you. Your clothing matters. Your pain tolerance is less. Your inner world is alive and present. Change is extremely upsetting. Sometimes your environment is your enemy. You are misunderstood. You get hungry when you're angry easily. You need stimulation. Conflict is your poison. Criticism is a dagger. You are conscientious. You're deeply moved by beauty. You are perceptive. I am an empath. My intuitive side always warned me about threats to my survival, even if I never really understood the impulses that saved my life. In times when I did not know how to fight, because I was taught by my family to be docile, obedient, and submissive as a child, I took flight from the least safe spaces in my life. And now I'm here. I was bullied in grade school. I tried not to attract attention in high school. In college, I realized that I wanted to claim my own space under the sun, even if I had to separate myself from my family. I was a late bloomer, but every child should know that they will and need to fight for their own space under the sun. Every school culture must give an empath a chance to survive and flourish by teaching them about their unique place under the sun. A place that is inclusive, diverse, caring, and respectful. I do not care if my school is poor. I was the most happiest in high school, hiding in the most rundown school I have ever encountered in my youth. Between school climate and culture, school culture helped me survive the most. I had the chance to be friends with students from all sections, meet the parents of my classmates, explore DOST Bikutan on my own for my research. I was 15. I lived in Caloocan. They gave me the chance to go to Bikutan alone and get lost. I survived. Now I'm here. Every child is an empath. For some reason, as we spend more time in school, the empath disappears. What happens in school? Research culture. When I say culture, it is not only the culture in campus. It is also the culture that bleeds into the larger spaces of society. It is a culture that is concerned about the spaces that children and learners navigate in the least safe spaces outside of school. When I see the violence that has seeped into the larger culture where our schools are embedded, I remember the fear that gripped me after my first bullying experience. I wanted to disappear. My parents had no time to see me anyway. They were both working. When they were at home, they were still busy thinking about income. I brought that desire in high school. I dreaded being seen. But a little nudge from friends who took me in as an adopted family member, from poor people who reached out to me despite their poverty, when I was volunteering in a poor parish, which my parents could not understand, I realized other people wanted to give me my own space under the sun. It was my imperfect school outside of my little perfect bubble school. They saved my life. Now I am here. Every child is an empath. Every empath that survives is someone who will advocate the creation of safe spaces, cultures of creativity, knowledge about survival. You need empaths to help schools survive in the time of pandemics and the automation of the fourth industrial revolution. Be proactive. Save your empaths. Create spaces and cultures outside of campus so that when they get transplanted in real life situations, they can give what they have, a culture of empathy and creativity. Give them the chance to say, now I am here. When we create a safe space for learners, we remove spaces where learners do not learn risk-taking and do not desire exchange of ideas and collaboration because all they want is safety. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. When we create a safe space for learners, learners will want to be seen and heard and valued. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But how do you do it in the time of the pandemic? First, you have to ask yourself where your stakeholders are physically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, and economically. Where your stakeholders are is where your learners spend the most time in your school in the time of the pandemic. The school now bleeds into homes, in the most insecure corners of an empath. Think about it. Research. So how do we support our stakeholders who were commissioned by an unwanted circumstance to work at home to serve our school? Do not expect employees, teachers, and staff members to work like they are in campus. The climate has changed. The culture has changed. Manage that change. You are now a co-stakeholder at home. How do you manage your stakeholders at a time of radical change? Your campus has changed. The call for creativity is now an emergency alarm. Do not get in the way. How do we build a climate of creativity during the time of this pandemic and those following? Research. Do not get in the way. Do not get in the way of imagination, creativity, and innovation. Blessed are those who invested in them before this pandemic happened. They have a large team. How do we construct a creative culture given the uncreative climate in the time of the pandemic? Let your creative teams talk and walk and run to the finish line. How do you do it? Research about your human resources. It's about time. Find your people who are good in the arts, design, and innovation. They will lead you to spaces of safety and generativity. These are spaces they occupy because it helped them survive. These are spaces they thrive in. They know where it is. They understand how it's made. They made it themselves. What values must we emphasize to construct the creative culture in the time of the pandemic? Ask empaths. Research. These are values that encourage learning from failure, risk-taking, and innovation. Your survivors, the empaths, know these values. These are survival values. What kinds of innovation should we encourage vis-a-vis our desired values? Both adaptive and disruptive. Adaptive innovations help us survive. Disruptive innovations help us break through a barrier. The form of innovations will depend on the insights you get from the research that you do in your respective schools. Research. What is creative education in the time of the pandemic? That is an amazing research question. Do it.
When you hear the word creative, you might think of a painter, or a playwright, or an author, or a photographer, or a filmmaker, or a chef. In other words, you might think of people who make things. I think it's what we mean when we use a label like creative type. But there's no such thing as creative type. We are all creative, every one of us. We just need a bigger definition of creativity. Yes, creativity involves making things, but it can also mean mashing up ideas in innovative ways. It can mean thinking differently about data and finding unique solutions to practical problems. It can mean hacking systems and tweaking things in unusual ways. It can mean exploring ideas and navigating information until you become an expert curator. It can mean designing systems that empower the creative work of others. It can mean creating change in the world by speaking truth and leading movements and interacting with people. See, each of these creative approaches shape our world in profound ways. And the more we see the creativity all around us, the more we are able to appreciate the creativity inside ourselves.
What cognitive approaches will work best in the time of the pandemic? Convergent thinking or divergent thinking, or both? How do you make it work given only your laptop or even without it? That is an amazing question. Do it.
Imagine you have a problem that you need to solve.
and you're looking for innovative solutions. In this moment, there's a good chance you'll choose one of two cognitive approaches. In 1956, the psychologist J.P. Guilford coined the terms convergent thinking and divergent thinking to describe these two contrasting approaches. Convergent thinking is linear and systematic, while divergent thinking is more web-like, focusing on the connections between ideas. Convergent thinking narrows down multiple ideas into a single solution. On the other hand, divergent thinking expands outward by generating multiple ideas, often thinking like a hacker and using materials in original ways. Here we treat barriers as design opportunities. Convergent thinking tends to be more focused, while divergent thinking is more flexible and iterative. Convergent thinking is analytical and focused on what's best. By contrast, divergent thinking is more open-ended, and participants are encouraged here to take creative risks, even if some of the ideas might not work. Convergent thinking asks why. Divergent thinking asks why not. Now, it may seem like these two approaches are competitive, but they actually go hand in hand. Often teams will use divergent thinking to generate multiple ideas, followed by convergent thinking to analyze and narrow down the ideas, and then later you'll use divergent thinking to come up with fresh perspectives, followed by convergent thinking yet again in this ongoing cycle. Both are necessary.
How do we design and institutionalize those cognitive approaches? That is an amazing question. You know what to do. How skilled and experienced are school leaders and managers in embodying and modeling the appropriate cognitive approaches? Better ask this question because schools will not survive with lip service. We need those cognitive approaches in action. ASAP. How involved are the rest of the community in building and sustaining the culture of creativity in flexible learning spaces? We need to know the answer to this question because it takes a community to educate a child. And the child is a ball of creative fire waiting to be unleashed. How creative and innovative are we in our approaches towards educating learners in the time of the pandemic? That's your research question for the next year. Highlight, underscore, italicize, bolden, and post on your fridge, lest you forget that some people will lose jobs if enrollment does not pick up soon. How do we connect the dots? Or how do we make sense of the confusion that surrounds us to create a school climate and culture of creativity that will take us beyond the time of the pandemic? If you want to be responsive, create problem solvers among your rank and file. If you want to be proactive, harness creative thinking. Creative thinking will help you develop problem solvers along the way. Creative problem solvers end up being empathic problem solvers. So how do we help learners connect the dots in any learning space, to make sense of any learning space and make it work to their advantage during the time of the pandemic? That learning climate is what will shape their learning culture during and after the pandemic. Remember that the true test of their education is how they decide to learn at home or anywhere they find themselves. Without the answers, without research, creativity, culture, and education, the whole learner is not guaranteed survival in the next pandemic. It is up to us, especially if the state is failing us. Without creativity, there will be no culture. There will only be collapse. If it's any consolation, I am here. I have survived. There are many of us. There are many of us here. Thank you very much.
Hello. So, In summary, no, I just wanted to tell everyone that the challenge during a pandemic is to break a barrier. The barrier can be broken if you're creative enough to think of many different options. And it's not for you. It's really for the child that you want to do it. So creativity is supposed to be our weapon against problems like this. So I hope that every school, if you find the opportunity, please find ways to cultivate that culture of creativity in everyone in your community. That's all. Thank you.
We are now in the question and answer portion of this learning. We will have until 5:10 for this session, the officially closed day 4 of the CAP Congress. Before we proceed, let me give a few reminders. Again, you have to submit a total of 3 evaluation forms to get your e-certificate, 1 evaluation form for 1 session each for yesterday and today, and another one for the whole Congress tomorrow. The links to the evaluation forms can be found in the captions of both the FB Live and YouTube video. All videos of the different sessions will be saved in the videos section of both the CAP Facebook page and YouTube CAP channel. You can go to these sites to view this session again or other sessions which you might have missed. The slides or presentations will also be uploaded on our website. For those who are not familiar with it yet, it's www.cap.org.ph. Second, please continue posting your questions and comments at the comment section of the FB Live or YouTube Live. We have some friends from the national office monitoring your questions and comments, and we'll be reading them out during this portion. Lastly, we encourage you to share this webinar, these sessions, to your networks with the hashtags CAP and hashtag CAP Congress. For our friends in YouTube, the new ones who have just checked in sa YouTube, please press subscribe, like, and press the bell for notification. Okay, we now go on to the questions. You ready, Doc?
Yes. Throw the ball.
Hello, we have many comments.
Wow.
Sabi po nila, what a very 21st century presentation. So creative. Yan, Doc.
Thank you.
And then, okay. Wait lang po. Here. The first question is from Father Edilberto Mesias. I'm sorry, it's not a question. Kasama nung commendation, sir. I am so amazed of this kind of presentation. As a missionary priest, I understand the value of culture. However, Dr. Bantugan have helped me a lot to find my way, what kind of research I need to continue in my graduate studies as a student in thesis writing. So,
what kind of research? First thing I
thanking you po. He's actually thanking you daw for the presentation. It parang inspired him to yung sa research na na gusto niyang gawin.
Okay, let me just comment on that kasi a lot of people ask that question, what what kind of research will you do? So the first thing you have to ask yourself is where you totally inclined. Kasi if you're a researcher, you will be investing a lot of time and resources in something that you should be very passionate about. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult for you to do the research. No, so one, it has to be attached to you as a person. How are you related to the research that you're doing? So if you're a missionary, I suggest you do something about being in the mission, your own experience. And that said, it can be phenomenology because it's experience based, or it's about, if it's about culture, then it has to be ethnography because it's about describing the people you work with, or even you as part of a community. So those are just examples. You can do explore other things, but I think the most important part is it has to be anchored on your particular experience because you're the main fuel for the research. And if you think you're doing a lot of good things for the community, if you think that the work that you do is actually going to be a source of inspiration for a lot of people, then why would you want to choose another thing to be your research? It has to be something that will fuel you. It has to be something related to what you do. And if it's something significant to your life, then all the more. So you need to be very convinced about where you are, draw inspiration from that, and then secondary na lang ang method, secondary na lang ang approach ninyo. Any mentor can help you there, but it has to be very crucial na you know what you want. Because even us in the technical panel, in any research panel that we sit in, the first thing that we ask is, what is your background? What do you do? What are you passionate about? And then the panelists' role is to really direct you towards the goal where you will be most productive in. Because it's useless to direct you elsewhere and it's going to be non-productive. You won't be able to finish your research. So that's my answer, no? Look at yourself, figure out what you're really interested in, get the mentor that will help you make it a good project, and then push until the end. And if it's something you love, you'll reach the end point.
Thank you, sir. Another question. This one is from Sister Rodora Tabamo. How can a child be protected from culture abuse when, in fact, the family itself started to do the abusing?
Complicated question, no? So I think the first thing that we should think if we're in education is we're the alternative home. So if something is happening to the child, it's the moral obligation of the school to figure out how that home could be better experienced in the school. Kasi otherwise, it will be school at home and it's school also in school. It's difficult at home. It's also going to be difficult in school. Then double whammy yung bata. Wala siyang way to go out. So the first responsibility I think of a teacher is to figure out what's happening to the child, and the first thing to do is to know that child. What's going on in that person's life? Normally, if you think about the child is bursting with energy. It tends to be out there, friendly, or building relationships with other kids. If it's not happening like that, it's impeding in the growth and the learning, then there's something wrong. It might be the school or it might be the home. If nothing's really bad happening in the school, then it's the home, and it's your opportunity to step in and figure out what other things can you do outside of the classroom to intervene in that child's growth. Because after all, we're teachers not in the classroom only. We're teachers in the whole campus. And whatever child goes into campus, it becomes our responsibility altogether. So you can't just say the home is not my territory. They're not learning because of the home environment, right? So you need to be able to facilitate the transition from something less positive to the positive in school. Ako, when I was a child, parang, of course, there's always going to be real life situations. The parents won't be around all the time. So there will be rude kids, no? And normally in bullying, the rude kids target the the weak kids. So that said, if I did not find a teacher who was listening to me and felt like I could go to the teacher anytime, the teacher didn't intervene anyway. But I felt that I was loved and valued in that school. So that said, I got courage because if someone's willing to fight for me, if a teacher is like that, I need to fight for myself too. So getting the strength to to correct what's currently there or to ask help is, I think, the responsibility of anyone in the school. We need to be able to say to the child, if you need help, call anyone here. Parang ganun lang. And you don't even have to go out there. Maybe the child doesn't need it. Who knows? But definitely, the child has to have an option in school. Ganon siya. For me.
Thank you, sir. So you're saying parang ano, sir, no? It's not just the guidance counselor, schools counselors.
So, it has to be everyone's job.
Yes, you do something
Yeah.
about it. Thank you, sir. Another question. This one parang nasagot niyo na po earlier with the video, but
Mm.
I'd like to ask it again because for emphasis, you might want to say something about it. This one is from Agnes Labitoria. The question is, thank you for your very down-to-earth sharing, Dr. Brian. How can we create an empath this time of pandemic?
Ah, to create an empath, you need to be an empath. Kasi, di ba, parang you can't reach out to a child who's scared and who's lonely and anxious if you don't see it, if you don't find it. Kasi for me, for example, my nature is that parang if there is a party, my attention goes to the person in the corner who's not enjoying it. Kasi I know that. I understand that. I see that person because I've been there. So I was connected to that experience. So the first thing to do is to be in touch with yourself, to be in touch with your weaknesses, to be in touch with your fears. Kasi if you want to be of help to someone who has that, you have to recognize that. Sa sa'yo muna. And then you will immediately find it in somebody else if it's so familiar to you. So I think that's the first thing. You have to be comfortable with the idea that you're not a perfect person, you're not always a teacher, you're first a human being. And to help another human being, you have to be a human being, right? And the human being is weak, the human being is vulnerable, the human being is scared and afraid. But I think the courage of the teacher makes him go beyond that level of experience. So kailangan mong balik-balikan yon, no? You have to be vulnerable to see a person who's vulnerable. Otherwise, you won't see anyone.
Thank you, sir. This next one is from Roel Humawan. The question is, Doc Brian, his name. He's from SPUD. I'd like
Magete.
I'd like to ask your thoughts on this issue of our research culture. It seems to me that our research culture also confines the creativity of researchers. Researches become very technical. It's technically it technically deadens the creativity of researchers.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this? And what can you do to make research culture a bigger space in expressing researchers' creativity?
So ako, I can resonate with that. Kasi the only idea we have of research, if you're not exploring new ideas about research, is what the very natural science way of proceeding with research, which is very technical, very yung ano siya, meron siyang protocols, kailangan sundin mo lang kung ano yung sinasabi and then proceed as instructed. Ganun lang siya. But know that research kasi can be many things, no? Outside of the natural sciences, you have options to do social science. And the social science research, if that's a field that's open to you, it opens you to a lot of opportunities to be creative. Because when you're in the field, you cannot not be creative because you need to adjust to different situations all the time. Like if your interviewee is not available or is not in a disposition parang positive for an interview, then you have to find ways, di ba? So, and finding those ways is an opportunity to be creative. So creativity is not just in the protocol. It's not just in the step-by-step process. It's your execution of that process, and a lot of the things that are embedded in the process are not written down. They're parang insinuated. They're parang part of the negotiating that you have to do while executing the plan. Ang totally dry talaga is the plan, clearly. Kasi that's a language that all researchers understand. If you want to proceed with the fully accepted, well mainstream kind of research, which is more natural science kind of research, then you have no choice. You have to understand how they talk. You have to understand their process. But to bridge the creative research, kasi may creative research din, and I'm also there. Creative research has a language of its own. It can be part of the social sciences. It can actually bridge to the natural sciences, but it doesn't have to, because the language of the creative research is not a shared language with the natural sciences. Ibang usapan, ibang lengguwahe, iba yung pinag-aaralan, iba yung pagkaunawa nila. Ito yung sinasabi ko na tacit knowledge. Ang ang overt knowledge, yung pinag-uusapan natin all the time, nakasulat siya, nasa document, nasa protocol, lahat yan, parang overt, it's all there. At yun yung hinihingi ng research most of the time, because the only basis by which moderators or peer reviewers will value research would be the ones in the manuscript. So pag yung manuscript yung pag-uusapan, clearly meron talaga siyang format, meron siyang process, rigid siya. But if you go jump the other side of the wall, and there are creative researchers there, you will know that there are many kinds of options you can find. And it's only a matter of parang trying to go beyond what they're saying about the natural sciences and how you can do research there, and exploring new ways. Kasi sa creative field, I don't know how many creative people you have in Dumaguete, pero I know for a fact na meron silang ibang practice ng research, and they don't have to be parang aligned with what's happening in the natural sciences. They have their own culture of research. But to help people who are creative to do research, you have to understand where they're coming from. You have to be able to say, if there's an opening for this kind of research, this is the requirement, it's not the same. So for a director, for example, kailangan ma-negotiate mo yung iba't ibang klase ng research sa eskwelahan. Kasi hindi lang isa yung anyo niya, marami siyang anyo. Social sciences is one, the natural sciences would be one, the creative sciences, okay, ginamit ko na yung word na creative sciences, kasi meron din logic yan. Kaya lang, nagproproduce siya ng something different, an object, an art piece, kaya siya creative. So that too has its own language and culture. So I think the first step you need to do is to figure out what the other options are outside of the natural sciences. Kasi marami, ang dami niya. No? And I've seen most of it happening. If you just go out of your university and figure out what's happening in the galleries, in other spaces outside of school, makita mo marami kang pwedeng gawin. But the last thing I want to say is, kasi ang restrictions, they're not supposed to be barriers to creativity. In fact, that is what stimulates a lot more creativity. If the person has a lot of resources, kumbaga ang dami niyang paghuhugutan, bigyan mo siya ng pader, maghuhukay siya sa ilalim ng pader. That's creativity. So how you deal with the restriction and the limitations is also an exercise of creativity. But of course, we can't do anything about the natural sciences. You can find ways, however, to do research outside of that. Yeah.
So parang sir, the feeling of being restricted is normal.
It's normal, yes. And it's there.
Yeah.
Yes, it's there. Tama ka. Pero a creative person can break that wall.
Break the wall.
Challenge,
sir, challenge.
Challenge siya talaga.
Another question, this time it's from Belindo Aguilar. Is there such a tool that can help us give a fairly good idea in terms of how vibrant is the culture of creativity is in a school?
Marami. There are instruments that can measure creativity in a school. Tulad nga nung one of the videos that I showed, parang it really depends on how you want to understand creativity. Because creativity, if you think of it as a thought process, it can be anyone's thought process. And therefore, there's a lot more opening. Magkakaiba-iba lang yan ng to what degree were you creative? But you were definitely creative there. So, depende sa definition mo. So, sa research, yung conceptualization mo, depende kung paano mo siya gustong unawain, and therefore, paano mo siya gustong bilangin or i-measure. So, maraming klase ng pag-unawa sa creativity. For me, I think it's not like one kind of person has a dominion over creativity more than others. It's really something that's open to everyone. Kaya lang, Ang problema is if you let the person from the biological sciences define creativity for you, you may have limitations. 'Di ba? So find different ways of defining creativity. Find the instrument that measures the concepts within that definition, and then pwede kang gumawa ng sarili mong instrument if you want, no? Depende dun sa definition na gagamitin mo. Kasi ang dami. In fact, one of the problems that we face right now in studies on creativity is how do you define it? How do you understand it? How does it happen? Do you study the brain? Do you study the community? Do you study the artwork? Do you study the practice? So, depende nga yun kung paano mo siya gustong unawain, and no one's barring you from creating a new instrument to measure creativity in your locality. Kasi kung school of living traditions yan, then definitely iba ang tool mo. Compared mo siya sa isang eskwelahan na nasa urban. Gumawa kami ng research ni Father Norman Peña on school climate and culture, we really defined the idea that the culture in a big school will be different from a small school. The relationships will be different, the expectations will be different, the output will be different. The size matters for culture. So that said, kung ganun nga, iba yung climate, iba yung culture, then creativity will be different too, right? So if you're a small school, then definitely you don't measure your creativity using the instrument of the large school. Kasi iba ang expectations dyan. Iba yung hahanapin niya. Kasi iba rin naman yung level of capacity niya to generate creativity in that environment. So my suggestion is find the definition, see what culture is fueling the creativity, and anchor your instrument in the culture that tries to fuel that creativity within your school. And very, very obviously, the size matters. So tingnan mo lang kung ano yung mag-a-apply sa inyo depending on the size of your school.
Got it. So this question, you may choose to answer it. Pwede rin pong comment lang, sir.
Okay.
Pero the way I see it, parang, I think you can answer it kasi ang lawak po ng understanding. This is from Summer Light. Thank you for a very meaningful and creative way of encouraging us to be researchers. My question is how to use depression felt by some college students to ignite their creativity.
To what? To?
Ignite.
Unite their creativity. Ignite their creativity. Merong pananaw dyan sa depression na conforme kung saan ka tumitingin. Kasi from a clinical standpoint, depression is a mental health challenge. It's here. Diba? It can be chemistry, it can be biology, it can be chemical, it can be a lot of things at the physical level. If you go metaphysical, ibig sabihin outside of just looking at the body, looking at the spaces that people occupy, no? Makita mo it has something to do with relationships with people. It has something to do with the creative environment. There is one study that was conducted in the lab, pero rats yung tinignan nila. So and they were looking at addiction. So when they studied the rat's behavior in a laboratory, nakita nila mas addicted ang rat kapag siya lang mag-isa at meron siyang substance doon na yun yung cause ng kanyang addiction. If you remove the rat and you put it in a different place, then the rat will no longer be addicted. Now, the addiction is sometimes parang attached to, if not related to depression, no? Magkaiba sila, pero sometimes related sila, nagiging addicted yung isang tao dahil meron siyang depression, no? So, comorbid sila in if I may say that term, no? So, what I'm saying is, depende kasi kung paano mo titignan. Kung tinitignan mo ang depression bilang isang kawalan ng kahulugan sa buhay, no? A lack of meaningful life, a lack of sense of purpose, na a lack of sense of hope of what's to come in the future. Kung ganun mo siya tinitignan, there are ways to use a person's creativity to ignite something else aside from what's here. Kasi creativity spurs a lot of imaginative work. And that means pag creative yung bata at may depression yung bata, posible mo siyang iangat. Kasi there's a study too that says people who are likely to become depressed are also very artistic and creative. So, kung ano yung curse mo, yun din yung grace mo. That's what I'm saying na it only takes someone to see that curse and to figure out if there's the grace there. No? So, kung makita mo yung bata na depressed at makita mo na creative siya, there's a grace there that can be used to parang turn the depression around. Kasi if I may also parang share a personal experience, I went through that to college. Parang I didn't see what's going to be meaningful in my life. Wag na lang, ganyan. Or wag na lang ako mag-school kasi it doesn't mean anything anyway. Or ayoko na, mga ganyan. So, surrendering. But the idea there is there is a dynamic between the physical and the environment. No, sometimes this science only sees the physical, and we can't blame that because that's their domain. That's the only thing they will study. But the dynamics with the environment is something you will see outside of the physical sciences. Makita mo yan kung isang pari ka, isang counselor ka, makita mo yan sa environment. At masama niyan kapag hindi na maganda yung physical, hindi pa maganda yung environment, kahit na merong grace dyan, hindi siya matutulungan, hindi siya makakawala. So, jumping on to the idea of creative people, because a lot of creative people go through the process of depression, depressive phases or stages in their life. I don't want to call it clinical, but we do go through such phases in our lives. Makita nila yon. Kita mo kaagad kung sino yon at kung meron ba siyang creative potential or meron siyang creative gift. Pag nakita mo yon at ikaw survivor ka, alam mo kung paano yon matutulungan yung bata. No? Ang problema lang, you can't call it therapy because therapy is a science. 'Di ba? Meron kang stages na dadaanan para maabot mo yung goal na magaling na yung person na may depressive symptoms. So you can't call it therapy, but you can help. And the thing there is, again, I'd like to repeat, kung meron kang mental health challenges, normally psychic challenge din siya, hindi lang siya mental. Ang kaibahan lang is yung psychic challenge kasi hindi siya wala siyang mainstream intervention. Kumbaga, nasa ano siya, outliers yung mga yan gustong tumulong, pero hindi siya mainstream intervention. Ang mainstream intervention is guidance counseling, ganyan, psychology, psychiatry, and I don't think there's bad, pero pag napasukan na kasi siya ng drugs, medyo mahirap na siya. No? Makukulong na yung bata. So, my idea is, totoo kasi ang music therapy, totoo din ang art therapy. If you know how to handle that, if you're interested to do it, then you will have a chance to help those children who have mental health challenges but have no way of looking beyond where they are. Kasi kailangan talaga na may mag-facilitate. Kung walang mag-facilitate, sila lang ang option nila. And sometimes the families do not give better options to them. So they're trapped. So someone has to reach out to them and tell them there's another way to get out.
Thank you, sir. From Father Norman Melchor Peña.
Hi, Father Norman.
Thanks to my creative research advisor, gem indeed for SPUM.
Ay, salamat, Father Norman.
From a member of our board of trustees, and I'm sure kilala niyo po siya. Dahil lang po kasi she had 2 comments there. From Sister Felicitas Bernardo.
Hi, hello sister.
Congrats for that very nice presentation. And she said, the professors at St. Paul University, Manila are very progressive in thinking. The reason why anyone who starts research or dissertation with us can finish to the end. We are outcomes-based.
Yes.
Congratulations, sir.
Salamat po, sister.
Another comment para Sir Kay. Sister Hannah Fedeline Bueno, thank you for these insightful, deep questions for research and reflection. It makes us administrators think more. The videos on paradox and complexity of culture you've shown to us serves as an eye-opener that creativity supports culture We
Yeah.
need to strengthen our school culture that supports creation.
Yeah.
Creativity is the key word. I agree, we need to be cultural managers and divergent thinking to battle against this pandemic.
Yeah. I'd like to comment. I'd
Sure.
like to share what happened to me nung first 3 months nung pandemic. Kasi nga, I, I'm 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 still that little child. I'm very honest about it. I'm very creative, but a lot of the inspiration is drawn from that little child who was playing. Parang ganon, hindi pa rin yun nawawala. It's still there. So when the pandemic happened, nawala yung playground for me. So ang nangyari was I went through a phase where I was trying to be functional, but deep inside I was really parang grieving. I was grieving that the playground was gone. Parang there's no way to play the same way, and the child was so used to playing in a certain way, ganyan. And as the mature person, na no, I have to work, I have to deliver, I have a job to do, parang ganyan, I have a time schedule, I have deadlines. So parang it was a continuous talk between yeah, honor that small child that cannot play, but try to help that child also figure out new ways to play. Parang hanap ka rin ng ways na mag-play pa rin siya na hindi lang siya naka-attach doon sa nakigisnan niya na lumalabas siya, marami siyang nakita araw-araw, nag-enjoy siya sa jeep, ganyan, gusto niya mag-MRT, wala lang, ganon. So, ang job ko at that time, being the adult that I was, carrying the little child that wants to play, was, sige, tulungan kitang maghanap ng new spaces to play. Pag, pag nararamdaman ko na okay na siya, then mas nagiging functional ako. Kasi I don't have to deal with that child and do my work, and they have separate worlds. So I have to address that. So in the same manner, I think among adults too, we have to realize, especially the ones who are creative, and a lot of them, once they don't recognize na there's a little child wanting to play still in you, have a dialogue with that child. Have a dialogue with that part of you who says, the world is changing. We need a new place to play in, pero there's not going to be one. We don't have an assurance. We don't know if it's going to end. So, hindi ako makatrabaho. Siya ay nadidepress. So, kailangan kami mag-usap. So, there's always an internal dialogue na, so what do we do now? So, those three months that happened with me was an internal dialogue between the creative side of me that felt restricted and almost dying because I can't do anything at home. All I have to do is do the chores, di ba? Or face my laptop. So, ang nangyari, I have to go back to my retreat, parang deal with this person who's complaining and then try to figure out how we can live at peace. Hindi siya mawawala, hindi siya alis. So, kailangan kong makipag-usap sa kanya. So, my problem then was, I know what I was going through, but I don't know if other people understand what people like me go through when certain things like this happen. And I know it's going to be difficult for them kasi sino bang nagkaroon ng pandemic experience before? 'Di ba? No one has. So, while you dialogue with your inner self, your little child, and you dialogue with your professional self that has to deliver, you have to dialogue with the real world who might not be able to understand your needs and the other person's need. So, yun. So, kailangan mature ka rin na tignan na hindi lahat may bibigay sa'yo. So, I think it requires a maturity to constantly admit na I'm not always going to be productive. I'm not always going to be efficient. I'm not always going to be right there doing my job. Pero it's going to be there soon. But I have to be creative if I want to survive this. Diba? So that was my challenge. Kaya kanina tinatanong ako ni ni Miss Cruz, ang sabi niya bakit ang ganda daw nung nasa likod. That was my way finding what the inner child wanted. Gusto niya maglaro. Gusto niya may nakita siyang iba, hindi yung bahay na kinalakihan niya, merong bago doon sa loob ng bahay. So I created this to sort of find a new avenue for me to be creative even if I'm not in school. So if that's what it takes for you to do that as adults, go ahead, do it.
And sir, may I just add, sinabi niyo rin po yun kanina, the person has to understand himself
Hmm.
first. Ano po,
Yeah.
Second, yung sinasabi nyo na accept mo na ito yung kailangan.
Oo.
Meron
If I may add lang ako ng isa. Kasi pag tumanda na tayo, feeling natin wala nating chance to play. 'Di ba? Parang wala na, practical na tayong lahat. Parang yung responsibility na lang natin yung tutukan natin, yun yung mas mahalaga. But no, I know a lot of people are like this. Meron ako mga nakikita sa mall, nangungulekta sila ng toys. Anong edad nila? 40, 50. It's not for their children, it's for them. I know certain people who are like that, no? And I'm happy they're still in touch with their young person, kasi that's the only thing that will keep you going and exploring and excited and creating. Parang nurture that, and you find that, nurture that, and play with it if you have time. Kasi kailangan natin yon. Kailangan niyang mabuhay para maging creative tayo continuously.
Thank you, sir. We have time for a few more questions. Yes. From Daisy Simbahon Abayan. Hello, Dr. Brian. Thank you very much for this inspiring talk. If I were to ask what could be a very relevant research now in the aspect of learners' language or creativity, culture, especially in this time of the pandemic. Actually, may a few more questions hearing to that question yung at this time of the pandemic, ano yung magandang research to be done?
Ako, I'd like to see a research that asks the children, when are they most uh, productive, or what is the time or occasions or circumstances where they see themselves more at play, more in the learning mood, more in the playful playful part of their life. Parang ganon. Kasi that's the only way you can adjust your delivery of of learning tools doon sa time na ganon sila. Parang I mentioned in the video na the school is parang hindi siya naharangan eh. Actually, nag-bleed ang school sa loob ng bahay. Pumasok siya doon. Kasi one of the complaints I got from one of my students is, nahihirapan siya sa eskwelahan kasi before na nagpupunta siya ng school, na alam niya na hindi siya susundan ng school sa loob ng bahay pag nakauwi na siya. Ginagawa niyang lahat sa eskwelahan para pag uwi niya ng bahay, hindi na siya magtatrabaho. Ngayon, sinusundan siya ng school 24 hours a day. So, ginulo ng sitwasyon yung pagkatao ng estudyante. Wala tayong magagawa. Ganun na talaga ang mangyayari. So the question now is, that student will never stop playing. Kasi bata pa yan eh. And that child will never die. So figure out when that child is most alive, and maybe that's the opportunity. That's the window for you to open learning for that person and to align what makes that person alive and playful with the lessons that you give. Kaya ako for example, I haven't done research here, pero that's the direction that I'm taking when I deliver my work. It's going to be more project based sa akin. Lalo na skills yung com, kasi yung mga estudyante ko eh. They're into skills, they will be in the industry soon enough. So ang ginagawa ko, what project do you think these kids will be more engaged in by themselves, and how do they attach the concepts you want them to learn while they do the play that they want at home. So parang secondary yung content, pero actually nagiging primary siya kasi mas engaged yung bata, mas nagiging klaro yung concept sa kanya. So parang binaligtad mo, kasi sa eskwelahan una yung content eh, tapos sinusundan mo ng play, 'di ba? Now inuna mo yung play, tapos sinundot mo ng content, pero actually yung endpoint niyan content pa rin. Kaya lang ang tanong ko is, and this is the opening for research, do we know when those productive hours are? And how do we apply that content we need to teach in those times na pinaka-productive sila sa loob ng bahay? Kasi hindi natin alam, right? So kailangan nating alamin. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. From Ren S. by Iporak. Thank you so much for your invaluable sharing. DepEd is saying no to periodical exams this year to prevent distance cheating.
Mhm.
Based on your research, what other creative, effective, and authentic forms of online learning assessment can you recommend in place of the traditional test?
Ah, first, kasi kung ganito na yung sitwasyon, I think if the child knows that he has learned, he will be capable of saying what he has learned. So kung output-based yung education na pinag-uusapan natin, dapat mag-translate yung kanyang natutunan doon sa isasubmit niya uh, product. And the highest level of thinking is creative, creative thinking, di ba? So for me, the way to do it is to find ways by which the child can create something out of the lesson, and then let that child verbalize what he has learned and why he created that particular output, no, out of the lessons that he has learned. So for me, I have nothing against exams, no. Kailangan yan in some certain disciplines, kailangan nyo yung mga standard knowledge, lalo na yung mga nursing, engineering, architecture, heavy on terminologies and concepts and formulas, kailangan nila yan. So, I think dyan yung mas may problema. Pero kung yung DepEd yan, in other places, sabi ko nga kanina, they learn by doing gardening. They learn math doing gardening. They learn sciences doing gardening. But the good thing there is, while they learn it, they do something else. So the learning is reinforced because they're doing something about what they learn. So in that case, addressing the question, siguro kailangan nating tingnan ano yung kayang gawin ng bata sa loob ng bahay na creative, and how do we find associations with that activity with the lessons we want to teach. Kasi kung wala silang makitang connection, mag-struggle sila with what they find at home. Mahihirapan lalo yung bata. Yun.
Thank you, sir. This one is a comment from Maria Socorro, Miss Socorro Calzado. Learned to learn different culture is something very enriching. Thank you, Dr. Brian Bantugan. You gave us an opportunity to learn more how to put ourselves in the right track during this pandemic.
May I comment? Because the main idea behind that presentation is we create culture. It's actually up to us. Parang our decision to stick to a culture or to change that culture is not up to anyone. It's not even up to the coronavirus. It's up to us. It's us who create the culture. And therefore, if you think about the situation right now, this is the most opportune time. If you want to create the culture, you have all the reason to create or recreate it or renew it or change it altogether. It gives you an excuse. The situation is there. Pero pag hindi mo nakita yung opportunity, lumagpas siya, nagkaroon ng 1 year, 2 years, walang nangyari sa kultura, hindi mo binago, hindi mo ni-revive, those opportunities have disappeared. Hindi na babalik yon. Hindi mo na mababago yung kultura in the same way that you would have if you just listened to the situation at hand and figured out how you can sort of tweak that culture to make it work best for the learners, if not for us. It's really for the learners. So, yun yung sa akin. I think we have to claim that power that at this point in time, this is the most opportune time to create, to change, to tweak whatever culture we have in learning. We have all the reasons to do it.
Kung nakikinig ka, ikaw yan. Halika na. Take the challenge. From Marilyn Lorente Balmeo, multicultural teaching in all subject areas is indeed a very important and meaningful approach to the teaching and learning process. It will teach learners the value of appreciating differences and diversity that each manifests in school. Excuse me. Appreciating the unique attributes of each learner, especially in this time of pandemic, is the key to learning to live together. I guess ito yung takeaway niya dun sa...
Yes. But may I comment?
Sure, sir.
Creativity kasi is putting together seemingly unconnected things, and when you put them together, something happens. There's something new that is generated out of it. Kaya mahalagang multiculturalism. Kasi you will see two different dots that don't seem to connect. But if you are creative enough in your thinking and then you put them together, something new happens. So multiculturalism stimulates a lot of creativity. So I think protect that subject or that direction in education because that's the only way we learn outside of our box or our little silos in school. Yun.
Let me go now, sir, to the some comments. Because the other questions, nasagot nyo na with your comments actually, sir. Thank you for that. Wait lang po. Okay. Okay. Dr. Bantugan, do you have a few words for your last words for yes, sir.
Okay.
Listener,
My
viewers.
Yes, my idea is since a lot of us are educators and administrators in this convention, I would just like to appeal, no, to appeal to everyone that take this opportunity to really open doors for creativity. Kasi this is the time when we should all work together and think about solutions, no, to the problems that we set us today. And sometimes the solutions, it's just a matter, it really depends on how you think about the problem. So maybe it's time for us to re-examine how we think about COVID-19. Because for a lot of us, it's just a barrier. It's a big problem. We can move around it. The vaccine is the only way to get out. But if you're a creative person, I think there will be a lot of questions in your head, and you have to ask, maybe there's another way of looking at this problem, and that other way of looking at the problem can give you new solutions. Now, the creative people, if you have creative people in your institution, get them together, let them think with you, let them sort of throw ideas out there. Because if you don't try that, it's even more difficult to get people outside of your institution to be creative with you. So rally together, do a group hug, and then ask yourself, what can we do now together as creative people in this institution? Yun lang po. That's all I can say.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brian Bantugan. So again, for making the time, so I know you were super busy, Sir Brian, Doc Brian, for
Thank
making
you.
this time and sharing with us his amazing stories, and for wonderfully answering the questions. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you also for inviting me. It's been an honor. Thank you.
Virtual applause for Dr. Bantugan. Thank you, audience, for your questions and comments. Audience, you may still post your appreciation in the comment section so he could also read them later. Okay, some announcements. We will be getting, for tomorrow, we will be getting 23 names from the evaluation entries and digitally draw um, for some prizes. We have 5 Logitech H151 Zero headsets. We have 4 Globe prepaid kits, 10 winners for 3,000 each, and 4 winners for 5,000 each. The names that will be drawn will be announced tomorrow. And we thank Brilliant Creations for the prize items and our major sponsors for the cash prizes. Okay, just a few reminders as we end today's session. Please join us again tomorrow. We will begin at 8:30 in the morning as we listen to the keynote address of His Eminence Luis Antonio Cardinal Tagle, who has just tested negative for COVID. You wouldn't want to miss that one. And for those who want to still donate to the CAP Calamity Fund and Kapatirang Kamagon, you may still do so. Okay, as we close today's session, may I invite everyone to a moment of silence. Let us continue to thank the Lord for the blessings and pray for those who continue to struggle through this pandemic. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. May I now invite everyone to sing our CAP hymn.
Dahil sa ikaw at ako,
natuto sa prinsipyong
punyo at serbisyong totoo.
kahalintulad ni Kristo,
Isang puwarang Katoliko. Pagkakaisa
sa tulong at gawa,
masasalamat
sa lahat ng alaala,
pagpapako.
ang misyon sa mundo,
Magagawa sa biyaya ni Kristo.
ang kabataan
May hamon at alay,
sa ating bayan,
maging lingkod at tulay.
ng pagbabago,
Sa misyon sa mundo, Birhen Maria ang gabay at ang modelo. Sa mundong may bagong anyo, isang bansang may bagong sigla. Dahil sa ikaw at ako, natuto sa prinsipyong punyo at serbisyong totoo. Kahalintulad ni Kristo, isang puwarang Katoliko. Bago, may bagong anyo. Bago, may bagong sigla. Komunyo, serbisyong totoo. Maging isang puwarang Katoliko. Isang mundong may bagong anyo. Isang bansang may bagong sigla. Dahil sa ikaw at ako, natuto sa prinsipyong komunyo at serbisyong totoo. Kahalintulad ni Kristo, isang puwarang Katoliko. Kahalintulad ni Kristo, isang puwarang Katoliko.
We are Diwa. We make teaching and learning possible all the time, everywhere. Diwa educational resources are designed to make teaching and learning happen in the classroom, at home, or anywhere. Make teaching and learning more fun and engaging with the new Diwa textbooks. Fully aligned with the K-12 curriculum and the Department of Education's most essential learning competencies, Diwa textbooks provide complete and appropriate content that prepares students for higher education or employment. Now, with its new interactive digital format, Diwa textbooks can be broken down into digestible, easy-to-browse modules that include additional visual elements and up to 10 gamified quizzes per module, reimagining the teaching and learning experience for distance education. Provide students with additional knowledge that are interactive, thematic, and interesting with Diwa Supplemental Educational Magazines or SEMs. SEMs are filled with articles and activities and come with a teacher's guide and editorial content that teachers can use as tools in designing effective learning experiences for students in the classroom. SAMs also contain interactive digital activities and can be used as an additional educational resource and reference material to augment students' learning sessions at home. Make meaningful learning experiences beyond the classroom with the power of Genio e-learning. With the ready-made interactive digital resources and add-on contents found inside Genio e-learning, teachers can save time in preparing materials for classroom lectures and discussions. Teachers can also maximize the collaboration tools as well as lesson and test authoring tools available in Genio e-learning so that students can learn safely at home, synchronously or asynchronously. Redefine student learning with Checkbox, our gamified assessment portal for grade school and junior high school students. Checkbox contains gamified drills that can be used in conducting quizzes and seatworks, providing teachers and students with a blended learning environment. Using the tools and features in Checkbox, teachers can create tailored activities as well as monitor learners' performance in real time, helping students develop mastery in 5 major subject areas, anytime, anywhere, and on any device. With DIWA's educational resources, teachers continue to be frontliners in nation building. Students become active contributors to the country's progress. And schools create a teaching and learning environment that defies any boundaries. Together, we give education the attention it deserves all the time, everywhere. We are DIWA. We move the nation forward through education.
With C.O.N.G.R.E.S.S Publishing Incorporated, we assure you as our partners to be there throughout the journey. We are with you in every step of the way. Technology is continuously evolving, and C.O.N.G.R.E.S.S is riding with it. From print to digital, C.O.N.G.R.E.S.S got you covered with the products that we offer. Spearheading C.O.N.G.R.E.S.S products are the C.O.N.G.R.E.S.S, an e-learning portal for teachers only, and the Leveraging Education, Augmenting the Future, or LEAF, for student-teacher access. For teachers, administrators, and school owners, we have the C.O.N.G.R.E.S.S. It is perfect for you in maneuvering fast-paced demands of the education field as we collaborate in creating a balanced amalgam of theories, pedagogies, and practices inside and outside of the realm of the learning environments. Reimagine, reinforce, recognize, to make quality education through a variety of lectures, trainings, and webinars in aid of instruction, classroom management, and institution management. These offerings are perfect responses. In connection to C.O.N.G.R.E.S.S, to provide service beyond sales, C.O.N.G.R.E.S.S also has the C.O.N.G.R.E.S.S for its partner mission schools in providing them with capacity building focused branding or rebranding the institution inside and out. It also practices reimagining various school scenarios and responses to the needs of the time, reinforcing school climate and culture through different webinars conducted among institution partners and in recognizing the value of each stakeholder in the success of value-laden instruction delivery. Another product of C.O.N.G.R.E.S.S is the C.O.N.G.R.E.S.S Assist. This offering features a 24/7 hotline for technical assistance in the use and maintenance of the C.O.N.G.R.E.S.S and LEAF. Almost everyone in the academe can benefit from this, from the teachers, admins, and school owners to the students and parents. C.O.N.G.R.E.S.S Assists aims to provide an assistance response team to address immediate technical concerns while ensuring the users the full utilization of the C.O.N.G.R.E.S.S and LEAF. It also offers visits with partners to address offline concerns when needed. We ensure quality service delivered through this hotline assistance to our partners, always. And lastly, C.O.N.G.R.E.S.S thinks. Together with the partners, we provide them with external consultations for present and future research agenda, accreditation certification, and imaging one. C.O.N.G.R.E.S.S thinks that with a client in full swing, it is redirecting the winds within their institutions. C.O.N.G.R.E.S.S thinks is for teachers, administrators, school owners, students, parents, and even extended service communities and collaborative partner agencies. Through innovative designs, proactive responses, and reconfigured goals, established institutions are on the verge of the fourth going to the fifth industrial revolution. Strong definitive vision is what's needed in remaining relevant and competent in this world. And this is what C.O.N.G.R.E.S.S is all about.
Through the years, we have been your partner in innovative teaching and effective learning. Our teaching and learning resources and the professional development programs for teachers and school leaders speak of the alaga that you deserve as our collaborative partners. Now more than ever, we commit to alagang Phoenix Sibs, the cornerstone of our mission in education. We vow to guide and support you in navigating uncertain paths in education today by providing holistic solutions that support instructional resiliency. With our MELCS compliant print and digital resources and programs, we help you future-proof quality instruction. Distance learning must-haves for students, teachers, and learning coaches. Designed for meaningful home-based learning experiences. Student-friendly activities that form self-directed learners. Replete with learning tasks that serve various instructional purposes. For advanced learners, and for those who need more instructional support. My Distance Learning Buddy Series. A modular textbook series for the 21st century learner in the new normal. 6 subjects, 1 learning package. MELC compliant. Easy to do learning tasks. Rich assessments that help inform learning and teaching. Phoenix C.O.N.G.R.E.S.S. Beefing up our holistic edtech programs and responding to the demands of the new normal. Our new edtech programs have been designed to address your needs. C.O.N.G.R.E.S.S Life, beyond a learning management system. C.O.N.G.R.E.S.S Flex empowers schools to effectively use learning technologies and resources. Redefining our commitment to advancing the standards in research and assessment to influence the quality of performance outcomes in schools and in the workplace. Computer-based testing in the new normal. At Phoenix Sibs, we army with holistic and meaningful resources. For innovative teaching and effective distance learning. At Phoenix Sibs, we help you get ready for the next in Philippine education.
Long quiz is also available to assess students' understanding of the lesson. Smart Class also features Wrap Up, a lesson ender activity that applies the constructivism theory of learning. In Wrap Up, students are expected to summarize the lesson on their own using a graphic organizer. You may also evaluate the quality of your students' learning by letting them practice their learning in real life through GR.E.S.S formatted performance tasks. The content of Smart Class is designed for the entire academic year, and it is available for 5 major subjects. All aligned with DepEd's K-12 curriculum and covers the most essential learning competencies prescribed by DepEd. Secure your own copy of Smart Class before classes open. Contact marketing@dibagroup.com to know more.
The COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in school closures all across the globe. But even in these uncertain times, education must continue.
Rodrigo Duterte says he won't allow students to go back to school until a coronavirus vaccine is available.
They have She's talking about the shift to distance learning.
Through this method, teachers deliver lessons outside the traditional classroom setup.
As a leading provider of e-learning materials in the country, TechFactors Incorporated is committed in helping you and your students experience positive teaching and learning environment inside or even outside the physical classroom.
The DepEd year, we will not anymore have these face-to-face classes with our students. We asked TechFactor if we can convert to TechTeach. And I'm happy because they agreed to that proposal. So, we have scheduled trainings already for our teachers.
The way TechFactors are handling their schools and the teachers is very accommodating and very commendable because they are there from time to time whenever we need guidance and help in terms of the LMS, in terms of the content.
Congratulations for coming up with very good, effective, relevant, and useful learning materials.
TechFactors is continuously finding ways to adapt and to adjust in this new normal. I am convinced that being partners with TFI is a big help in this time of new normal.
TechFactors Incorporated, making learning a great experience. For more information, visit us at www.techfactors.com.